welcome you to this study in the book of Colossians. And let me just say this, if you like what we're doing, hit the like button and then subscribe to this channel, and you'll get notices that we're posting a new video, and I think it will be a blessing to you. We have so many videos on our YouTube page, and they cover so many topics. So go ahead and avail yourself to those videos, and they will bless you and help you to grow spiritually. Now we're talking about the gospel. We're talking about this seed that's always producing, always being fruitful in a person's life. We're talking about having it sowed into our lives. And now we look at verse number 7 again of Colossians, the first chapter, verse number 7, and it says, just as you learned it from Epaphras. Now, what's Paul talking about? Paul's saying Epaphras came to you, and Epaphras sowed in you the gospel. You know, we need to understand that the gospel is sowed by people. You and I, we are responsible for sowing the gospel. We are the ones that take the gospel to the world. If you've got an unsaved friend and you're praying for that unsaved friend, you know what? There's two things you need to do. You need to pray the Lord of the harvest that he would send a laborer into your unsaved friend's life. And you need to go sow the gospel into their life. Now, I'm not talking about grabbing a Bible and begin to preach and yell and scream at them. No, you just need to talk to them about the goodness of God, because we already covered this, but the gospel always shows us and helps us to understand the grace of God. So, how is the gospel spread? How do people receive the gospel? They receive it just like the Colossians did. The Colossians received it from Epaphras. Now, who was Epaphras? Epaphras was one of Paul's students when he had his Bible school in Ephesus for 2 years. The Apostle Paul operated a Bible school in Ephesus, and Epaphras was one of the students there, and Epaphras actually took the gospel to Colossia. Let me tell you something. Paul never went to Colossia. Do you understand? All the fruit that's coming out of the church at Colossia, all the good things, all the love and the faith that Paul's talked about, all the hope has come because one man went to Colossia, and his name was Epaphras. And Epaphras went there and he sowed the gospel. He didn't go there and say, well, I'm going to give you this teaching. I'm going to tell you about this, and I'm going to tell you about that. In fact, later on, we're going to talk more about the Colossian heresy. And you know, one of the things that the Colossian heresy did, and it was the main thing, is it attacked the gospel of Jesus Christ. It took away the simplicity of the gospel, that Jesus is enough. Well, Epaphras comes to Colossia and he preaches the gospel. Now look how Paul describes Epaphras. He says, our beloved fellow bondservant. Paul didn't say he was one of my students. Phew, look at me. No. Paul said Epaphras, he's a beloved. In other words, I love this man. But not only do I love him, but he is a fellow bondservant. In other words, we are walking together. We are partners together as bondservants. Now, what's a bondservant? A bondservant is a person who would give up their life for their master. What's Paul saying? Paul's saying Epaphras is a bondservant along with me. In other words, we are on equal ground. We are working together as servants. We are working together in the gospel, in the spreading of the gospel. You know, one of the things that that we need to be very careful of in the church is this thing of I am doing this, I am doing that, and this isolational type of teaching. It's our church, it's my church. You know what? The Apostle Paul didn't think that way. And we see it here with Epaphras. He didn't say that's one of my students. No, he said we're a fellow bondservant together. And then notice what he says about Epaphras next, who is a faithful servant of Christ on our behalf. What is Epaphras? He's a faithful servant of Christ. He is serving Jesus. So many times we put such great emphasis on us serving other people. But we need to realize that Epaphras, even though he was walking along with Paul in a place of being a bondservant, Epaphras had his eyes set on one thing, and that was serving Jesus, serving Christ. He was a faithful servant of Christ. He walked with Christ. He learned from Christ. He did what Christ told him to do. He was a faithful servant of Christ. And then those last three words, on our behalf. You know, Paul's sitting in Rome. He's under a house arrest in Rome. Now, Epaphras is there with him. But Paul is saying, Epaphras, even though Epaphras was the one that carried the gospel to Colossia, Paul is saying, he's working along with us. He's working on our behalf. In other words, all of us together are working for the same goal, for the same thing. And by the way, that thing is to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. So Paul is saying, and now in verse number 8, and he has informed us of your love in the Spirit. You see, Epaphras is free. He's a free man. And he's come back to Paul in Rome. And he's saying, Paul, that church in Colossia, they just love each other. But they love each other not with a natural love, but they love each other in the Spirit. Now, we've talked about how that gospel produces love. And so what he's saying to Paul is the gospel's working in Colossia. It's working in Colossia, and it's causing these Colossians to work together in the spirit of love. Wow, what a wonderful, wonderful study we're doing here in the book of Colossians. Join us again tomorrow as we continue this study.